Hello, and welcome to RIVE, Reflections in Veterinary Education. We have decided we are going to do a state of the podcast. And we haven't really talked about what that means. So Eric, this was your idea. I'm going to turn it over to you to at least, tell us like what the idea was and where that came from, and then we'll just get to it.
It just occurred to me we've been doing this for a while now. So we've been recording for 2.5 years, publishing for 2 years. And I just thought, hey, it's called Reflections in Veterinary Education. We know how important reflection is for learning. Let's pause and reflect on ourselves. Like, let's model the behavior.
Love it.
Sounds great. I did not realize we've been recording for 2.5 years already. Where does the time go?
That was also my reaction. It goes by quickly.
Yeah.
So I guess my first thought is what are we doing? We never wrote a mission statement, we never wrote a purpose. We just started recording. So what are we doing?
Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
Just having fun. I mean, to me, it's like getting to talk to fellow education nerds and get perspectives and ideas and thoughts and have some fun disagreements and talk through things and just generally talk about veterinary education. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of a fun thing to do. I don't know, Bobby, what you think?
It is a fun thing to do. So it's funny because for podcasting, because I've got the other podcast that's geared more toward veterinary content with students as the intended audience. And
pitch that. What give us the name so people can find it.
Yeah, so we renamed it Vet Club, but you might also find it under Veterinary Journal Club. And so started doing that in 2019. So it's been a minute. And it's funny when I think about both this show and Vet Club, it's amazing how many conversations that I will have with people, and I think, God, that would make such a good podcast. And it's just everyday conversations of us talking about things that I think there's some good stuff in there. And that's one of the things that I like that we've done, which is similar to what we've done with Vet Club, is we don't rehearse, we don't have a specific plan or agenda. We just kind of let the conversation go. And I learned on my other podcast that if we try to rehearse or plan it out too much, it's not good. It's sometimes I'll have guests on the show and they'll want to they'll be nervous. They've never done this before and they'll want to talk about it. It's no. When we've done that, it's never because then you're oh, this is good stuff. We should be recording this. And then we go and try to recreate it and it's just not as good. It's not that organic how it happens. And so I think for me, a lot of this is just having those normal everyday conversations where good stuff happens, good ideas pop up. And I feel we've had a lot of those in the moment, oh, we had a couple shows ago, Eric had a personal revelation and I just love that. And I think, not every show, not every podcast is going to land with every audience or even who your intended audience is. But I do think there's just a lot of good stuff to capture. And so, yeah, I hope that people are listening and enjoying it. And it's bringing forward for them their own ideas, because we don't have all the answers, right? But we're just having the conversations, and I think there's a lot of good with that. So
yeah, speak for yourself, Bobby. I have all the answers.
Well, you've been holding back on some of those then.
But I have a question for you, Eric, because you have another podcast too, right? Are you still doing it?
Ish. I have a blog and I did some podcast episodes for it. Yeah. But go ahead.
Well, no, I was just curious because that's
So I have my blog, Vegucator, and that is aimed primarily people doing internship, residency, faculty, kind of career path type stuff. And I started that because I kept answering the same question, and I'm I'm just going to write a blog post and then just send everyone there. And I had another blog before that, and they both kind of went for 3-4-ish years and then fizzled out. And I think there's two major reasons. One is I felt like I had things to say and then I said them. Yep. And I'm great. Now the universe has access to this information, And then the other was I didn't really have much accountability because it was just me.
Yeah.
So that's actually something that I really appreciate about this, and really glad that you guys have like stuck with it.
Yeah.
Is like the accountability piece is huge. Like if I know someone else is going to be there, it's like, oh, I better show up.
Yep.
But
If
clearly
it's
that
just
doesn't
me, I'm
always
going to be
work for
like,
me.
eh.
We make mistakes with the
But I'm
scheduling, or
working on it.
sometimes we're running late. You know, we all have our lives. But you're right, Eric. It is nice having the plan and the schedule. That is something that I've actually struggled with Vet Club, because, you know, I'll get busy, life will get busy, and so we like don't put out the episode. So I think this has been really nice, because we've been trying to keep it really regular and predictable, which I think for a lot of listeners that's helpful. And I have not been nearly as good. Now we try to put, like, sometimes we'll put out content 2 or 3 podcasts in a week or two, and so, you know, and then we'll go sometimes for months without. So I think this has been really nice to have that predictability. And yeah, so what are your thoughts, Eric? We didn't really hear what your thoughts were on why we're doing this.
I mean, I only had that thought this morning as I was kind of contemplating today's episode. I was like, hey, what are we even doing? And you know, it was inspired by the Key Lime podcast, which is medical education. And I was like, we just don't have this in veterinary medicine. And I don't know, I just tend to jump into things. Like if my wife did not rein me in, I would be running a B&B on the west coast of Ireland, you know, with my friend Carl, if his wife didn't rein him in either. Like, you know, I just am like, I got this idea, let's do it. And without any, you know, limiter on me, I'm just gonna do stuff.
Yeah.
But don't you think that, like, it's works most of the time for you to, like, let's just try it and see what happens?
Yeah.
I'm because I'm that way.
I'm that way too. I mean, I know you two may not believe that, but I literally was thinking about this the other day. John and I were having a conversation in the car, and I was like, who knew I'd be a serial entrepreneur? Like, you know, it's not something that I would normally do. And a lot of that has to do with, I have a spouse who's very supportive and also will rein me in when it's necessary. But I mean, like, I have a consulting business, I have a toffee business, I have a nonprofit, and I'm, you know, like all of these things. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm so not prepared to do any of this. But sometimes the best way to learn is to just jump in and start swimming.
100%, 100%.
You know?
When I started the last podcast, the Vet Club, it came out as an idea. So, confession time, I don't really listen to podcasts. Right?
No, me neither. Like,
it's
not
ridiculous.
At all.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. But I was so I was at Florida at the time, and I kept hearing about everybody and all the podcasts they were listening to, and like students, interns, house officers, and I'm like, okay, so everybody but me is doing this.
Oh, no.
But if I want to reach people, right? Like if I want to have, you know, I want to reach people in a different way, like meet them where they are. Don't like try to come up with, you know, what works for me, because that's not who I'm targeting, right? That's not the audience. And so talked with a couple other colleagues, and it was like, well, we should start a podcast. And so I think a lot of people say that, and it was like, yeah, well, that's not a thing. And I'm like, no, I said it out loud. It's happening now. And so like met with other people, and they, I was like, okay, let's do it. And so literally like Google how to start a podcast, you know, and find out that nobody knows what they're doing. And that the best advice that I came across was, it's going to suck when you start, but just start and you'll get better. And that honestly really was the best advice. And so we just like got some equipment. It wasn't that terribly expensive, and just started recording. And I can't listen to any of my, like, I can't listen to my own voice recordings. Oh my gosh, whenever Topher's like doing, I'm like, oh, turn that down. But it probably would be really good to, you know, go back and listen to some of the earlier episodes, and then appreciate how far, you know, we've come. But I think there's a lot to be said for just trying, right? Like what could go wrong? So you've got some podcast episodes that are out there in the world, and you're like, okay, maybe they're a little cringe and they're out there forever, but there are worse things that are out there on the internet in the world that people have done. And so I think, I don't know, I don't think it's coincidence that all three of us are like, let's just try it and see what happens.
I think it's actually really funny, because my nonprofit, we were in the very early stages of it, and we were trying to figure out ways to get our name out there and try to start a, you know, sort of build some momentum and things like that. And none of us were good at it. But one of the things that we talked about was doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. And at the time, one of my board members was like, well, you know, it's pretty complicated to do a really good podcast, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And I was like, I didn't know, right? Because this was like Casey and me and all this other stuff. And I was like, but I had done some guest podcasting with like you, Bobby, and
Mhm.
you know, with Eric and some other people. And I was like, in my head, I'm thinking to myself, it
Doesn't seem
doesn't
like
sound like it's that hard and that complicated. Like I don't necessarily, I'm not a tech person, but I feel like you could just Google it and you know, it
Mhm.
might not be perfect, but you could figure out. But like he totally convinced us that it was like this huge endeavor and we shouldn't, you know, dive into it unless we had like
Yeah.
a studio and all. And I'm like, okay. And so we never did it. And now I'm like, oh, we probably should have just done it, you know? And
Not too
I
late.
I think probably for monetization
Sure.
would be a different thing. You know,
Yeah.
if you're trying to make money off of the thing and you care about, you know, search engine optimization
Yeah.
and getting it, you know, and all that. But I think if you're just doing it for a hobby, as you discovered, yeah, like, or for
Yeah.
information purposes to spread the
Yeah.
word. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we weren't, I mean, if it ever came to monetization, then we probably would have crossed that bridge and been happy to do it. But in my head, it wasn't about like
Yeah.
getting people to pay us or pay sponsorships.
No.
It was just like, how do we get the word, meet people where they are, right? And
Yeah.
this was when podcasting was really becoming a thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, we could do a YouTube channel. That would be a lot easier. And I'm like, okay, but then people have to see this
That
face.
video. God, that's so much
You
harder.
know, like, so yes, I realize we're on a YouTube channel, Eric.
Oh, that's so funny.
You know, I think, and yeah, it's not too late. We should probably try to start one. But it was just interesting that he was just so
Yeah.
about how difficult.
It's funny to me that they thought a podcast was complicated, but a YouTube channel was easy. To me,
too.
And a YouTube channel doesn't have to be complicated,
Right.
but as soon as you introduce like video and plans and things like that, to me, that adds a whole layer that you don't have to have with a podcast.
Yeah.
And
he's a
really
lovely
fun.
person, but he's a physicist. And
Yeah.
so like, I don't know if you all are familiar with the logo from Asomi, but it's basically a sort of very what do you call that? Toned down elephant. Like it's the shape of an
Yeah.
elephant with an eye. And he saw it and he was like, why is your logo a paperclip?
Oh.
And I'm like, that is such a physicist answer.
Oh, that's too
Like,
funny.
such a physicist perspective of the world. Yeah. And
That's-
it does kind of look like a paperclip with an
When
eye.
you say that now, I'm like, I kind of see where they came with that, but like, it's not. That's what.
But literally to 90% of the people are like, oh, that's such a cool logo. It's such a cool elephant. You
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
he was like, why is it a paper? I'm like, okay.
That's too funny. So another thing though that got me thinking about is marketing and how do we spread the word? And I don't know that we've ever talked about that either. Like, how are we getting this out to people? And I can tell you never did any of like, so the most I ever did with Vet Club was like send an email to like students that I was currently teaching, like, hey, here's some stuff, especially if there would be like a topic like, hey, I actually, you know, recorded a podcast on this topic. And so if you want to listen to that, if that it's not required, it's optional, but if that's something you're interested in. And people find it though. Like I've gotten emails from people all over the world that have reached out and are listening. And so without really any effort on my part, it does get out there because the potential audience is relatively small. So if somebody is looking for a topic in veterinary medicine, there's a few scores, but there's not thousands of podcasts to choose from. And so for veterinary education, I imagine it's the same. However, I also wonder, like, could we be doing a better job of marketing that? Yeah, we're all nodding because yes, we could. But like, what does that look like? Because that is certainly not my area of expertise. And so I wonder if that's something to consider as well. Like, are we doing as much as we should be to get this out there?
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. And, you know, I would like to have it where when an episode gets published, which is on the first Monday of the month, that like the next day or the following week, like I go on social media and, you know, I put it out there through that method. And, you know, I send an email to like my professional colleagues and be like, hey, there's an episode that might be interesting to you and all of that. I think that I personally tend to worry about over messaging and like spamming people.
Yeah. I do too.
Yeah.
I do too, but I also think at some level, and maybe this is selfish of me, like I think when we all started, we weren't necessarily in it for the marketing and the audience. We were in it because we just enjoyed having conversations ourselves. And if other people wanted to listen in, great, you know, and so for me, it's kind of like, well, I don't want to spam people. I don't want them to think that I'm like pushing anything on them. And at the same time, did I say something that maybe I don't want everybody to hear? You know,
oh, that's funny.
Which I don't think I have.
I have thought about that a lot, actually. Like I am I mean, I'm all about being authentic, but the problem is most people don't actually ask, "Hey, Hoff, what do you think about this thing?" And so they
Yeah.
don't know what's going on, right?
Mhm.
And there are
Oh,
definitely times where I'm like, yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what people think of me saying that.
Yeah.
I'm not like afraid of it per se, because if they asked it to my face, I would say the
Yeah.
same thing. It's just
yeah,
people never ask me these things, you know?
Right.
that's
Agreed. But
interesting.
also, I mean, I think there's sometimes some contextual things, right? Like, and I know we
Mhm,
have conversations that sort of morph and do have some of that context, but I also
mhm.
think somebody could potentially take it out of context and use it in a way,
Yeah,
Oh, totally.
right, that
Yeah.
it's not intended to be. And then you find yourself
Yeah.
defend yourself for saying something that really you should never have to defend yourself from. I talk to my friends a lot about how grateful I am that I am the age I am, because if I'd grown up in the social media
oh yeah,
era, like I wouldn't be where I am, because
yeah,
people are so quick to pull things away from
yeah,
something that a young person has said and assume that that is still represents them when they're 25 or 30 years old. I'm like, I said really stupid and hateful and hurtful things when I was a kid because I was a child, and I had an
mhm,
immature brain and I didn't have experience and I didn't understand like the humanity and sort of social fabric of things. And I look back on some of those things that I probably would have posted to social media when I was 12, 15, 18, 21 years
yeah,
old, and would have had to do a, wag the dog situation and have to spin it and
yeah,
defend myself, when in reality it's because you don't have experience and enough
yeah,
of a perspective to really know the things that you're saying are kind of dumb, and
yeah,
it's very hurtful, but you just don't realize it. So
yeah.
yeah, I think that's one of the things that I do think about, because people are kind of mean sometimes and
Yeah.
will do stuff like that. I mean, I would hope that.
Yeah, I don't know that like I feel immune to saying and doing dumb things still, even though like less
Oh,
likely.
you're right. Yeah.
I'm still like I still say and do dumb things. And I guess I for me, I guess I worry less about it.
Yeah.
Because I feel like I know in myself, like my intentions are good, and the people who I care what they think, right? Like somebody out who I would care what they think would also be the kind of person who would, I think, be more forgiving and like could ask and be like, hey, when you said this, that was like
Yeah.
really dumb. Or that, and they could ask and I could say, oh, I could either reflect, I could say, I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm a human who can learn and grow. Or I could be like, oh, no, here's that context that you need. And so rightly or wrongly, naively, maybe I go through and with the podcast, I'm just like, we just kind of do it. And I know I say dumb things, but I don't think I'm saying mean spirited
Right.
things or like intentionally malicious things, like, trying to keep it positive. And so I guess I just, like I said, rightly or wrongly, haven't really worried that much about it. And I think that authenticity, like you're talking about, Eric, is what matters more. And yeah, but that risk is out there, but like that risk is out there living my life normally, right? I don't know that it's necessarily heightened. And I am grateful because like this is still vet med and vet education, and like our potential audience is still not that big and not a particularly like mean or vindictive group that's like looking for that gotcha moment. So I
Right.
think I'm just like, meh, like whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, I think,
Yeah,
and I agree that at that level, the people that I care about, that I
yeah,
would worry, not worry, but that
yeah,
I would make the assumption that they would ask me before they would jump to
yeah,
conclusions, right? But I do think that there's enough people out there, and I think that I've experienced it enough times in my life
yeah,
for stupid stuff that it obviously it hasn't kept me from doing and saying the things
yeah.
that I do and say, but it does sort of like, you know, make me think about it once in a while. Maybe.
No, and I recognize in saying what I'm saying that like there's a degree of privilege in that, in saying like, hey, I'm not worried about what, so I've reached a certain point in my career
Yeah.
where I'm like, okay, I've achieved X and I have, certain credibility and I feel comfortable. Again, rightly or wrongly, that's how I
Yeah.
feel. But there is some privilege in that, in feeling like I can say the things that I want to say and I can mess up and I can stumble, and that I have a large support system that is not going to be like, okay, one and done. You made a mistake, you said something dumb, and you're out forever, which I'm grateful for. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
So speaking of our audience, do you guys want to know some of our statistics?
Oh yeah. Ooh,
Sure.
share.
Um, don't have a whole lot of numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure these are all bad, just to
Yeah.
preface that. But I don't know what good is.
Yeah.
So first of all, we had to move the podcast hosting. The old site that we had blocked us. They removed it. They were like, this is unauthorized content. There was something malicious about
So
what we were
funny.
doing,
Probably something
apparently.
dumb I said, and I don't even
Speaking
know.
of-
No. I'm sure it was just absolute
Yeah.
absurdity,
Yeah,
nonsense.
some random something.
Yeah, so we did have to move to a new hosting on Fireside a
Mhm.
few months ago. So even though, we've been having these episodes for a while, the data are not representative. So
Mhm.
we've had 60 total downloads of
Mhm.
episodes. And it's slowly creeping up.
Yeah.
Um, and then on the YouTube channel, we've had I think we've had 60 views total, and 45 of those were in the last month.
Oh,
So
interesting.
again, trending upwards, which
Yeah.
is my experience with the blog as well, that for the first, I don't know, year or two of writing the blog, like nothing happened, and then, reached a little bit of a tipping point where it
Yeah.
started to tick up. So, like there are people out there. I think
Yeah.
we have a number of subscribers. We have 30
Cool.
subscribers to the YouTube
Oh,
channel.
boom. That's
Ooh,
awesome.
fancy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is exciting.
That is
That's awesome. I
exciting.
think I told you guys when I was at Virginia, Maryland, probably around this time last year, I was talking to somebody who's in industry, and I said something. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been listening to your podcast. I love it
Yeah.
so much." And I'm like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah, your Reflections of Veterinary Education. It's awesome."
That's awesome.
I was
That's
like, "Well,
very
that's
Yes.
cool. I didn't even know anybody was listening to it at all." She's like, "Yeah,
Right?
it's great."
Yep. For me, when we
Yeah.
started, it was always like if a couple people are listening, right, and
Yeah,
enjoy it, like
besides
to
your
me, that's
mom.
worth it.
Like your
Besides
mom
my
is
mom.
going to listen.
It's really interesting though. So a couple things I will comment on that, Eric. When we're doing some of the research on the stats for Vet Club, it's really hard to get accurate numbers for that, because not all of the podcast platforms will give you that information, and even without, like, is it a download or is it streaming? Because if they do it streaming and they don't download, how is that counted? And so one, I always say, well, this is the minimum, right? There's probably more than that, because I'm, an eternal optimist apparently. And I'm like, that's probably a fraction of the people who are listening. But I do think there's some truth to that. I do think that it is misleading, in the numbers. But again, for me, the most important thing is like, is anybody listening? And if like a couple people are, it's worth it. But it also gives me another thought, like, if you are listening to this episode right now, reach out to us. Let us know, like, what's working for you? What are you liking? What do you want more of? What are you like, that was fine, but maybe you could do less of that? Like, feedback is, I'm sure we've talked about it many times on this show. Feedback is super helpful for, improving it. And so if there are things that you've liked better than others, like, reach out to us, tell us these things, because I love that for Vet Club. If somebody reaches out, hey, would you talk about this? Yes, thank you. I would love suggestions for what to talk about. And I think the same would be true for this. Or if you want to be a guest on the show, that is also welcome.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I think it's definitely my impression that people, especially who monetize things, that the community is a really important part of that. Like the people get to interact with the YouTube person, such as it is. And I am all for that. Like comments on my blog, for example. Like, I love that when that happens. But I think probably it is a sufficiently niche audience.
Oh yeah.
That is part of the reason why there's just not a lot of engagement.
No. And I don't expect a lot, which is why I sort of ask for it, because like if we do this for 2 years and we get like 1 or 2 emails with somebody saying, hey, you know what, I would love it if you would talk about this. I'm like, perfect. That's super duper helpful, because we have, I haven't checked Vet Club in a while, but the last time I did, and it's been a minute, we were up to like over 75,000 downloads.
Wow.
And that's in 5 years. And that's, a lot of episodes. And I get a handful of emails a year. I get maybe 3 to 5 emails a year from like legitimate emails. We do get like, I will say, we've reached a point with that one that we start to get like random people who are like, hey, we could hawk our product on your podcast.
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't. But
Yeah.
but we still don't get a lot of that. Just like what you said, Eric, like it's pretty niche and most people aren't really going to be, it's not really that kind of thing. But when people do reach out, I find it incredibly helpful. So if you have been listening and thinking about something, I would encourage you to reach out to one of us. That's all. That's my plug.
I have a question that is completely unrelated to anything that we've been talking about.
Love the non sequitur.
Yeah. But do you consider yourself an extrovert, Eric, or an introvert or an ambivert?
I am, let's see, one of my friends said, you're the most social introvert I know. So I like doing social activities. But I have learned since my wife told me I'm an introvert that I am an introvert. I did not think so because I was raised by a hardcore ADHD extrovert.
Okay.
And so I was like, this is how people are supposed to act. And so I pushed myself to do that.
Mhm.
And only once my wife told me like, oh, you don't have to do that all the time and be on. I'm like, I don't? What do you mean? Then I realized like, no, I don't like people. Like I'm basically a misanthrope, you know, like if I could just have my own time all the time, that would be great. Except for like a handful of people that I want to socialize.
Yeah. Okay. Bobby?
I am definitely an ambivert.
Okay.
And extrovert, introvert, right? Like I'm not shy, like no one's ever described me as shy, but where I think my favorite kind of description of introvert versus extrovert is kind of like, where do you get your energy?
Yes.
And social interactions, being around a lot of people drains me of my energy. It does not give me energy. And so in that regard, I am very much an introvert. Like hanging out with people all day is fine. I can do it. But I'm tired. It wears me out. And so, yeah, in that regard, I am introvert. But when you take the test, I'm usually like right in the middle. Like I am, some days I would fall on the extrovert side and some days introvert. So I think I'm a pretty classic ambivert.
Yeah. Okay. I'm actually very, very introverted. I am like way over on the introvert scale. And I'm just curious because as you were asking for that feedback, I'm actually doing a research project with a group of people that's looking at feedback and student perceptions of feedback, particularly in the clinical year, as well as faculty perceptions of feedback. And it got me wondering if the way that people give and receive feedback is influenced by their extroversion or introversion.
Interesting.
And so again, had nothing to do with anything. There was a flip switched in my brain when you were asking for that. And I mean, from the outside in, I think a lot of people would assume that I'm an extrovert, and probably the same thing about you, Bobby, maybe less so with you, Eric, because you tend to be a little bit quieter anyway. But I like every time I am an INFJ on the MTBI, consistently have been for the last 30 years, you know, like there's, and if anything, I've become more introverted. So yeah, I was just, again, that's one of the great things about getting together and talking with people that you like and colleagues, and just sort of like the flip switches sometimes in your life.
I'm sure it does, right? I'm sure it plays a role. It's probably not the only factor that determines how you like feedback, but I would be surprised if there's not some overlap there. Why did you cringe when I was like asking the audience for feedback? Were you like, no, that's not how I want it?
No, not at all. I actually, I am one of those people that I want feedback and I want people to give me feedback, but and frankly, people have given me really nasty feedback. And even after the initial sting, I'm like, oh, okay, that's legitimate or it's not legitimate. And not everybody can do that. But it just sort of was like, I wonder if, you know, people being introverted, extroverted, ambiverted has in any way influences sort of the way they perceive feedback, want feedback. Because, you know, some of the ways when I've done feedback, like sessions and talked to people about feedback, I just did one actually. I talk a lot about sort of the generational impact of if you're, you know, I guess like a baby boomer, there's sort of this profile of a baby boomer that, you know, wants feedback in a certain way and views lack of feedback in a certain way versus a millennial versus a Gen X or a Gen Z or so. It was just another way of thinking about what might influence how we give and receive feedback, and something that we could consider as we're trying to figure out how to do that. So
it'd be interesting.
Sorry, didn't mean to.
Is that a qualitative or a quantitative
study? It is. It's both. So it was a survey that had quantitative and qualitative questions, and Shane Lyon is actually at K-State. He's the one who's the primary investigator on that. I think you've done some work with him also, Eric. And he he was sort of being pressured by the group that initially it started with to do a mixed methods paper. And during the conversations that we were having, because I'm helping with the qualitative aspect, obviously, he was like, yeah, I'm just going to have to go back and tell them it's going to be 2 separate papers.
I think I remember you telling, yeah, I think we talked about this before. That's too funny.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, no, that's always smart. It is interesting. And it's funny though, that like, ultimately, I think if I had to say like extrovert or introvert, because again, ambivert, I would lean toward introvert. And so all 3 of us would consider ourselves more introverts. And yet how different are the 3 of us? Like I think how different we would be perceived by others, but yeah. It's
I think that the ideal ratio is 1 extrovert to 3 introverts is the groups that I notice getting along well that I'm in.
What is your scientific basis for that, Eric?
Yeah, I mean,
it's
how much do I enjoy this interaction? Like if I'm one-on-one with an introvert, I'm like, oh, that's exhausting. If we have 0 extroverts, it's like, this is awkward now, so try it out. Look the next time you get together with your friends and be like, okay, what's our ratio like here?
That's really funny. You know what's funny about that is I think that's another instance where that's where my ambivert kind of comes in. I wonder if I probably adjust depending on the group, right? Like there's a bunch of introverts and everybody's standing around awkwardly. I'm like, all right, let me put on my extrovert hat. And then there's another extrovert. I'm like, cool, let me just sit back here and I'll be quiet. And that's so funny.
Yeah, that is really funny. But yeah, I guess if you think about it, that might actually be fair enough. 1 to 3 seems reasonable.
That sounds good. I love it. 3 plus or minus 1. Oh yeah. Yeah. It's a good ratio. Now, how far does that ratio extend, right? Like if you have a party and it's like
how big of a group?
Although at some point you get a number and you're like, introverts like too many. Nope.
Yep.
Because that's where my introversion comes out too, where it's like, would you want to go to a party with 30 people? I was like, how about we get a couple people together and we play board games? That sounds way more fun.
Yeah. I at one point, so John and I like Disney World, which I think that there's no secret to that, but we were down there in the M&M store in Disney Springs, and they had all the different colored M&M t-shirts with their like sort of representative sayings, and I ended up buying the brown M&M and posted it because she was on there and she's like, I'm sorry I'm late, I really didn't want to come. And I'm like, totally me.
Oh, that's so
totally
funny.
me.
Yeah.
See, I go early before anyone else shows up so that I can tick the box of I care about you. I was here and I was actually helping to launch the party. So I got here early and then it starts to get loud. I'm like, great, now I can go.
I've done my part. I showed up.
Yep.
I earned the social credits and now I can leave.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I will say, not that this whole podcast needs to be talking about introverts, extroverts, but talking about how your wife was like, no, you don't have to do all these things. I kind of knew that like I was drained of energy, and like going to conferences is like the classic where everybody's like, oh, everybody needs to catch up and let's all get to, and the further along, as you all know, you've been at this place and this place and this place. Instead of this group that you knew from this time wants to get together. And then, and I'm just like, I can't do it. And I was actually at a communication training, and they were talking about like, it's okay to just say no to those things. And I was at this training camp, and then the group that I was with was like, hey, we're all going to dinner. And I was like, you know what? No, I think I'm just going to stay by. I'm going to grab like a burrito at Chipotle and I'm going to go to my room quietly. And they were all like, okay, see you later. And that was it. And I was like, that was so easy. Like I should be doing this all the time. Now it isn't always that easy. I have had other times where people are like, oh no, you have to come. And I'm like, no, I'm good. Thank you. But it is really nice to just say no sometimes to that social bit when I'm tired. I'm like, I've been on all day. I need to go and turn off.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's interesting because I really enjoy teaching. I love the actual teaching part of it and the process of it. But I also get home on those days when I've had to teach a lot. And I'm like, like, so that's these starting Friday of this week, going for about 2 weeks. I am going to literally be peopling all day, every day for like 9 days. And I know that when I get home, I am probably going to sleep for a really, really long time. and
Yeah.
just be exhausted for a really, really long
Yep.
time.
I'm teaching at this boot camp and it's like 7:30 to 5:30 for the next 4 days, which that's way more exhausting.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
like,
that's brutal.
it is pretty
Yeah.
brutal, but it's a really intensive trip. It's going to be really good, but it is going to be exhausting. And each night, I think the only night like they have dinner for the instructors, they only have it one night. So the rest of the time I'm like, nope, I'm just going to go do my own thing and then go to my room. Thanks.
Yep.
Yeah.
But
So
back
so
to the
to
podcast.
re-steer us to reflecting. So I guess, like, what have you guys taken out of the time that we've been doing this so far?
I can say my favorites have been having guests on and like just hearing people's stories. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. It's just so fascinating to me, because they're like, a lot of them are people that I kind of knew, but like didn't know their stories, and everybody's story is so fascinating. And so that, maybe that's the extrovert in me. I don't know. I was like, oh my God, I love hearing about this. I also really do appreciate like the journal clubs, and we do a lot of journal club in like the medical side, and we really don't do a good job, I think, of just having education journal clubs. And so I think that's a unique thing that we are doing and offering here. And then they all kind of turn into topic shows, right? Because we go off on tangents, but yeah, I don't know. But I have really enjoyed bringing guests on. I think that's been really fun for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think the guests have been really fun. There are some people that I've known really well and some people haven't known very well, but I've learned something really interesting about every single one of them. And I think it's been good for us to sort of demonstrate the breadth of veterinary educators that exist, right? Because I think we've been good about bringing people on who are clinical veterinarians and who are PhDs in education, or who, like just people who are across the breadth of veterinary educators, and not been cliquey about that, which I think has been really nice. And I've enjoyed the journal club, but I will say for me, what I think has been, and maybe this is going to sound really snarky, has been interesting, is that there is really so much bad research out there in the veterinary educational space. And I guess I shouldn't say bad. I should just say like not as high a quality as I would like to see.
not fully realized.
Right. Yeah. And I think,
to its full
and
potential.
I think it's really easy to take apart any research paper,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
obviously think yours is the best and then somebody rips it apart. But so that aside, but then I also, in my own head, as we reflect on this, I say to myself, but veterinary educational research is only 30 years old. And that's like nothing in terms of research. And so the fact that we're seeing an explosion in it, or what I would consider an explosion now, and sort of a lot more interest in it, I think is also really encouraging to me. And so I really appreciate that. And so even though like the journal clubbing and the topics have been really good, I think more than anything, it's like the understanding of the evolution of it and seeing it really come into a place where it's really being accepted and really trying to be very rigorous and getting better and better has been really, I've really appreciated that.
Yeah. Well, I think having journal clubs helps with that, right?
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
I think having those
Right.
critical discussions and saying, look, there's something to be learned from this, right? However, let's also like elevate the quality that's being done. Let's talk about what went well and what are some things that could have gone better. Because like you said, you pick any research paper, I don't care who's doing it, the best research, there's still going to be flaws, right? It's never going to be perfect. And that critique coming from a place of this is how we get better is part of that progress. So I think that's really important. But Eric, what about you?
Well, to that note, I learned that I've been using, in all of veterinary anesthesia, has been using the word washout period incorrectly for the past, whatever, 50 years, the specialty has been in existence.
Okay, tell me more about that, because I probably have too then.
Yeah, so I was reviewing a paper and the other reviewer had this comment that, no, it's not a washout period. A washout period is when you document that there is no biological impact whatsoever of the first intervention that you did. So you like do blood sampling or tissue sampling, like do full, biochemical profiling, like all that kind of stuff. And it's usually months.
Wow.
And in veterinary anesthesia, we call it good after a week.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wow, yeah, would not know this. And so now whenever we do journal club, I point out to the residents, I'm like, they should call it an interval, not a washout period.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've been getting that wrong too.
Didactic.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Teaching about the didactic train.
Yep. It's true. But honestly, like we all get taught this wrong, right?
Right.
And so, and then you use it until somebody comes through and then you're like, I don't know, and you Google it and you're like, holy mackerel, they're right.
Well, I mean, I used didactic that way for a long time
Oh, yeah.
too. And I mean, I think even I know a lot of educators who use it that way because it's kind of like Kleenex or toilet paper. You know, like
Right.
it's just what you call things, and it's easier than saying classroom based or lecture based
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's good.
Well, and it's funny because the way people use didactic isn't necessarily wrong. It's just that's not what you mean, right? Like
Right.
you're
Complete,
when
yeah.
you mean classroom based, like yes, there is an intention to teach, but you're implying the other thing is not that.
Right.
And yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I will say, I think the other thing about Journal Club that's been really good for me is recognizing sort of, I think it's helped me be a better reviewer, you know, in many ways, because it's like, and I like to think that I try to give good constructive feedback anyway, that it's not just like, this is terrible and you didn't do anything right. Like I try never to be that kind of person. But it's given me sort of the opportunity to reflect on some of the feedback that I've given and how I could maybe improve that and do that in a way that's like really supportive and, you know, and that kind of thing, but also stays true to encouraging people to do really good qualitative research, knowing that it's not going to be perfect, but just pointing out, like, I think I told you guys I was that reviewer on a recent paper, and I like to think that I was nice about it. It was like, listen, I really appreciate all the work you've put into this, all the, you know, changes that you made. However, I cannot recommend this for publication until this part is fixed, because I want this to be a good paper. And so, and ultimately the author was responsive and ended up getting it done, and ended up saying, you know, really thank you for helping me make this paper. So I think that's been helpful. And I think it also helps me be a better recipient of reviews, because it is easy to tear apart any paper. No paper is going to be perfect. And you just realize that no matter how hard you work on it, somebody's going to find a flaw. And it's like, okay, is this a fatal flaw? Is this something I need to die on the hill over? Or is this just something I need to be like, okay, cool, I'll fix it and let's move on.
Yeah. I think that's the tricky part, right? Is trying to strike that balance, because you want to help improve the paper, right? Improve the clarity, and improve like the impact that it can have. But also you're like, I'm not one of your researchers, so like I can't change it. So it's just asking you to kind of acknowledge, not overstate. I think for the education research, there really is like, it's what I struggle a bit with is like when reviewing papers, when it's like, okay, they went through the whole process of the research, the design and the methods and the results, and they didn't have any theory that it was being performed through. Here I am coming in as a reviewer. I'm like, I wonder if you looked into this there. Like, so after the fact, you know, adding that in. And I think that while that's not the ideal way of going about it, my hope is that getting people to realize like, hey, this is a better way to do this. This is how we want to approach it. And also just making people familiar with some of these concepts. Because again, my first few papers, there was none of that. I didn't know what I was doing either. And so now I'm just like, wow, like, don't you just want to go back and redo some of them? Like, is there a second chance journal that we can publish in?
That might not be
such a good idea.
Yeah.
Oh, good thing this is recorded.
My Tuesday is packed, so unfortunately I need to wrap.
Yeah,
so
no, that's fair.
What about thoughts for the future? What do we want to do going forward?
Good question. I might need some more
just
time
keep
to
doing what we're doing. You know, like
I mean, I think it's keeping doing what we're doing for now, and then if something else comes along, having the conversation about it. But I and that's where that place, like where Bobby was like, hey, if you are listening to this and you have questions or ideas, that would, I think, really be helpful to us, because we don't want this to become stagnant. But I mean, there are endless people out there we could bring on. And things like that, but some of them we may not know. So, you know,
I like this. The one thing I also wonder specifically about is the pace. Is this a good pace? Like one episode a month, is that good? Is that enough? Is it not quite enough? I don't know how much more we could do. I don't think less would be good, but and then I personally like the rotation of, you know, it's not perfect like this, that, but like we get to kind of mix it up between those three broad categories of journal club topics and guests. But maybe a different proportion would be better, or maybe, you know, I don't know. So I think I will need to reflect on that more, but I agreed. I would love to hear from some listeners out there if they have thoughts on that. Did you have an idea when you asked that question, Eric?
No, not at all. I rarely have an agenda.
No, I know.
It just in life, I'm just like, hey, I don't know. What do people think?
That's what I thought, but I was like, let me turn that back on you because maybe you have some thoughts. Yeah, I don't know. But it's probably
I think I
pause.
would like to, I think the one change I would like to make for myself would be like doing a little more marketing.
Yeah.
You know, trying to
Okay.
find that
I
balance of
think we should
like,
try to do that.
just let people know that it's out there without,
Yeah.
you know, flooding their
Yeah.
social media, etc.
We should
Yeah.
resolve to do that. I think all of us can contribute to that and be a little
Yeah.
bit better. I think that's a good step in the right direction.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Love it.
Agreed.
Oh, well, this was fun. Thanks for the idea, Eric. I think it was good to just take a little time and reflect on how we've been doing, and we'll have to make that a regular thing maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Cool. Thanks.
Love it.